Nissan Skyline R34 GTR sold 3 months ago at auction for $359,000. In 2013, you could get the same car for $50,000. So how did a niche Japanese sports car that was already expensive go from being under MSRP to 7 times over MSRP in less than a decade, all while being illegal to own in the United States? Let's talk about that.
Tucking into the left-hander, lots of Nismo in Japan over Mr. Hioki to come have a look at it. He's amazed by it. He's up another 3.
The GTR story starts in the 1960s. A small Japanese car maker by the name of Prince Motor Company used to sell luxury automobiles for the Japanese market. Their most famous models, a Luxo cruiser called the Gloria and a sports car called the Skyline. Prince loved to race cars, so they designed the Skyline with competition in mind. And while it wasn't the fastest car on track, it was quick enough to even get the Porsche drivers a little bit nervous at the Japanese Grand Prix in the mid-60s. In 1966, Nissan, one of the dominant players in the Japanese car world, was struggling to keep up with the automotive juggernaut at the time, Toyota. And so, in an effort to gain manufacturing strength and technologies, Nissan hammered out a merger deal with Prince Motor Company, and they began selling Prince cars at their own Nissan Prince dealerships. This was a rocky transition at first, but eventually things began to smooth out. Market share began to grow, and Nissan decided to start phasing out the Prince name in favor of just Nissan. And in 1969, Nissan took one of the favorite Prince cars, the Prince Skyline, and make a hotted up version that gave consumers a taste of the Skyline's motorsports heritage. What they came out with was the PGC-10 Nissan Skyline Gran Turismo Racing, or GTR. This was a 4-door Skyline with a dual overhead cam inline 6 making 160 horsepower. Advertised alongside the Nissan R380 race car, this Skyline GTR meant business, and the Japanese public were impressed with the motorsports-derived drivetrain and chassis. But a 4-door sedan? Nah, this needed to be in something with 2 doors. So in 1971, Nissan gave Japan the KPGC-10 Nissan Skyline GTR Coupe, a meaner, smaller, racier version of the same angular GTR 4-door that came before it. This generation Skyline actually ended up becoming known for its boxy styling, and so it was given the nickname Hakosuka. Hako in Japanese meaning box, and Suka meaning Skyline, as in the Japanese pronunciation of Skyline. With the success of the Hakosuka, Nissan was ready to bring the Skyline into the 70s. So in 1973, they released the KPGC 110 Skyline GTR. This Skyline was an evolution of the previous GTR, with more modern styling and bigger disc brakes, but otherwise the drivetrain was exactly the same. And this one even got its own nickname, Kenmeri. This was thanks to a Japanese ad campaign featuring this Western couple named Ken and Mary traveling through the Hokkaido countryside in a baby blue Skyline.
Ken to Mary no Skyline.
And people loved it. The Skyline was slowly becoming a real part of pop culture, and the growing GTR nameplate was an indicator to the world that Nissan Motorsports was thriving and hungry. And then after less than 1 year of being on market, Nissan killed it. Well, I say Nissan, but I guess technically it wasn't their fault. It was the oil crisis. The 1970s oil crisis dealt a massive blow to performance cars across the entire planet, and Nissan wasn't spared from it. After making only 197 KPGC 110 GTRs, Nissan ended production and retired the GTR name. Nissan continued to make the Skyline as a more economy-focused coupe and sedan with the C210 Skyline, but it was far from a motorsports experience like the old GTR was. After that, through the 1980s, Nissan made the R30 and R31 Skylines, which did get some hotted-up versions with the RS and the GTSR respectively. These cars did alright on track as well, with touring car racing quickly becoming Nissan's motorsports of choice in the 80s. But the magic just wasn't there, and Nissan was always left with a feeling that they were missing that special motorsports heritage that was so quickly snatched away from them in 1973. And so in 1989, Nissan brought the GTR back.
Johnson out on the rebel strip. It's Richards now grabbing another gear. Let's have a look at the horsepower. Hasn't got any horsepower.
The Skyline GTR EBN R32, or R32 for short, debuted in 1989 and was designed by Chief Engineer Naganori Ito to specifically dominate Group A racing. Their target? The Porsche 959. To pull off this feat, they needed some serious race-derived engineering, and so this Skyline came equipped with an all-new engine, the RB26 DETT. a 2.6-liter twin-turbo inline-six making 276 horsepower that sent its power not just to the rear wheels, but to all four wheels, thanks to a new high-tech all-wheel drive system called Atessa ETS. And it also had four-wheel steering thanks to Nissan's Super Highcast, which worked in conjunction with Atessa in order to give the Skyline grip in almost any situation. And they didn't stop there. Nissan also homologated certain Group A modifications into a road-going car called the R32 Nismo. Nismo was an abbreviation of Nissan Motorsports, and this special 500-unit run of the GTR was all about motorsports. It was about 70 pounds lighter thanks to an ABS delete, and it had upgraded aero, tires, and bigger turbos, all so it could be more competitive in Group A racing. Every piece of tech in this car was developed on the circuit, and it showed. The R32 dominated Japanese touring car racing like no car before it, winning every single one of the 29 debut races that it entered, and taking the Japan Touring Car Championship in 1989, 1990, 1991, 1992, and 1993. It was such a monster on track that it earned the title of Japan's other fire-breathing monster. I should mention though, despite all of the international recognition that Godzilla was getting, it was still exclusive to Japan. Nissan felt as though they didn't need to expand the niche Skyline model to their global lineup. And so the people of the West could do nothing but read about the GTR in magazines and see it dominate in touring car racing on television. In 1991, Nissan released the Skyline GTR N1, another homologation special, this time for Group N racing in Japan. The N1 had an upgraded motor, radio and AC delete, and even had thinner paint to make sure the car was as light as possible. You might be noticing a trend here. Nissan was not shy about making special editions of the GTR, with the N1 models making up just a few hundred of total production. And this limited edition trend is important to why prices are so unbelievably high today, but more on that later. In 1993, Nissan once again brought us a special GTR. This one, the Victory Spec, or V-Spec for short. It was made to celebrate Nissan's dominance in both Group A and Group N racing. The V-Spec retuned the Atessa ETS all-wheel drive system and gave it bigger Brembo brakes, and they only made 1,400 of them. And then in 1994, yep, you guessed it, they brought us another one, the V-Spec 2. This really just had all the V-Spec 1 stuff plus wider tires, and they made just 1,300 of them. And so in the span of just 5 years, Nissan had made a base model GTR, a Nismo, an N1, a V-Spec, and a V-Spec 2. 5 different versions of the GTR, which was already a submodel of the Skyline. Funny enough, in 1994, when the V-Spec 2 R32 GTR was released, Nissan was already selling the next generation R33 base model Skyline. But the GTR was just so sought after that they continued making the R32 version into 1994. In 1995 though, Nissan properly brought the GTR into the 90s, with the eBCN R33 Skyline GTR. The R33 basically had the same drivetrain as the R32 before it, but it had grown in every measure, including a 200-pound increase in curb weight. The R33 could be bought as a standard or a V-Spec at launch. The V-Spec had upgraded suspension as well as an Atessa ETS Pro all-wheel drive system. The V-Spec was 20 pounds heavier, but like the standard R33, it didn't show it, with the standard R33 GTR being 21 seconds faster around the ring than the R32, and the V-Spec 2 seconds faster still. Nissan also joined GT1 class racing, and with the new class of racing came new homologation requirements. So for that year, Nissan made one, yes, just one R33 GTR LM. That car lives on display at Nissan's headquarters, so it can hardly be considered a road-going car. And so the next year, in 1996, Nissan decided to make the GTR LM Limited, a 188-car run that was celebrating Nissan's participation in the 24 Hours of Le Mans. Another limited edition, but this time it was really mostly aesthetic upgrades. Not quite a legitimate motorsports monster like the N1s and V-Specs of old. And well, Nissan realized this, so the very next year they made the Nismo 400R. It was a bored and stroked 2.8-liter RB26, putting out 400 horsepower, codename RBX GT2. It had fully built internals along with upgraded turbos, and the car itself had a wide body, carbon hood and wing, and Nismo forged wheels. This was, by every definition, a motorsports monster. It was Nissan's most extreme production R33, hell, Nissan's most extreme production Skyline. And even though they intended to make 100 of them, by the end of production in 1998, they had only made 44. Another generation of Skyline capped off with a limited run of an insane special edition. You can see why so many years on there are R33s that fetch eye-watering prices. But as the title suggests, the Skyline GTR that would go on to become absolutely unattainable hadn't even been made yet. In 1998, while Nissan was bringing us that crazy Nismo 400R, they had already started selling the next generation R34 base model Skylines. It being the turn of the century, it debuted with the RB20 and RB25 Neo. These were revised versions of the RB that were designed for better fuel economy and to be better to the planet. But let's be honest, nobody was waiting for the version that got better MPG. And so in 1999, Nissan released the fire-breathing, 327 horsepower R34 GTR. This GTR still had an RB26 and still had the Atessa ETS all-wheel drive system, but this time was driven with a 6-speed manual transmission from GTR. The chassis was significantly upgraded as well, with the R34's footprint being shrunk down from the R33, despite weighing a little bit more. And at launch, like the R33 before it, you could opt for the V-Spec model. It came with the same Atessa ETS Pro all-wheel drive system, along with upgraded aero and a carbon fiber diffuser. But of course, this is Nissan, and so in addition to that, there was the V-Spec N1, another homologation special with radio and AC deletes, of which Nissan only made 38. And all these upgrades on the R34 GTR could be seen at work at JGTC, the Japan Grand Touring Car Championship, where the famous Pennzoil R34 GTR won the 1999 championship and subsequently became an icon in the Gran Turismo video game. In 2000, Nissan replaced the V-Spec with the V-Spec 2, and it got stiffer suspension, larger rear brakes, and some carbon fiber. And in 2001, Nissan released an entirely new special version, the M-Spec. The M-Spec, or Mizuno Spec, was named after Kazutoshi Mizuno, the chief engineer, and it was a slightly softer edge version of the hardcore Skyline GTR V-Spec. It had electronic adjustable dampers, a full leather interior, and even heated seats. And then the next year, in 2002, the final year of the GTR, Nissan created the pinnacle of the GTR name, the V-Spec 2 Nür and the M-Spec Nür. These Nür versions, named after the Nürburgring Nordschleife, had upgraded engines with bigger turbos, along with gold accents and some other aesthetic upgrades around the car. They were created to celebrate the Skyline's Nürburgring record, with the R34 being the fastest Skyline around the Green Hell and even the fastest series production car at the time. And between the V-Spec 2 Nür and the M-Spec Nür, they only made 1,003 of them. And then that was it. 3 years and numerous special editions later, the R34 GTR ended production. Despite the apparent success of the GTR name, the shakeup at Nissan following the merger with Renault meant that cars like the Skyline really needed to be reevaluated. The newly appointed CEO, Carlos Ghosn, was tasked with making Nissan profitable again. And one of the biggest moves of that plan was making Nissan more global. And so the Japan-only R34 Skyline was replaced by the V35 Skyline, a rebodied version of Nissan's FM 350Z platform, and exported to worldwide markets as the Infiniti G35. The motorsports-bred GTR brand was officially retired, and the world-famous Godzilla was officially dead. But the Nismo team still had a little bit of strength left in them, and with the R34's dying breath, they created the most special version of the R34 GTR there ever was, the Z-Tune. The Z-Tune concept was initially shown in 2002, but it wasn't until 2003, a year after the R34 went out of production, that Nismo was given the approval to make the Z-Tune. But there was a problem. Nissan didn't make the R34 GTR anymore, so how was Nismo supposed to make a special edition version of it? Well, they decided to do what any of us would do if we really needed a GTR. They bought used ones. Nismo bought 18 used GTR V-Specs, all with under 29,000 kilometers, and stripped them down to bare metal so they could be rebuilt as Z-Tunes. They gave it a special 2.8-liter stroker version of the RB called the RB26 Z2, based off of the Le Mans race car's RB26 Z1, which made 500 horsepower. The chassis was seam welded and reinforced with carbon fiber, and then sprayed in a special Z-Tune silver and reassembled by hand. One customer, however, managed to convince Nismo to leave his car in the original Midnight Purple 3, one of the GTR's most iconic colors, thus making his Z-Tune one of one from the original run. Needless to say, these cars were truly special, even among an entire line of Skylines that were already special. A fitting send-off for the GTR name that spent the last 24 4 years, striking fear into racing teams' hearts from the East and the West. And by this point in the mid-2000s, the Skyline GTR had already become a legend around the planet. It was the Japanese supercar that the world couldn't have. Us Americans especially would look on in awe at Japanese tuning shops and racing teams that would build these world-destroying GTRs. And then in 2003, Universal Studios decided to put an R34 GTR in the hands of Paul Walker in Too Fast, Too Furious, and gave the Skyline even more reverence in the Western tuning scene. The most frustrating part, there was just no way we could get our hands on them. The US has a very strict 25-year import ban on foreign vehicles, with very few loopholes. And the few loopholes that did exist were rendered useless thanks to the Motorex scandal, which put the Skyline squarely in the crosshairs of the DOT, thanks to Hiro Nanaoshi and his merry band of miscreants. The only real legal way to get a Skyline GTR in America is to wait for its 25th birthday. Fast forward to 2007, and Nissan had just unveiled their GTR concept. Now separated from the Skyline name, the GTR was a revival of the iconic Skyline GTR, but this time not a Skyline at all. The Skyline name still belonged to the V35 and the FM platform, so the GTR was just a GTR. And while technically the new GTR's PM platform is based off of the V35's FM platform, according to Nissan, it still isn't a Skyline. All this meant was that the Skyline R34 GTR was well and truly the last of its kind. And that held true, especially when you considered their resale prices. The R34 wasn't a cheap car when new, costing about $70,000 US in today's money, with the M-Spec nearer costing over 80. Depreciation on the R34s were fairly standard fare, so by 2009, when the new GTR had come out, R34 GTRs were selling at auction for about 4 to 5 million yen, or about 40 to 50,000 US at the time. The most expensive sales were 6 to 8 million yen, and those were for V-Spec 2 Nears and M-Spec Nears. And from 2009 to about 2015, that's about where they stayed. But late 2015, well, that's when things started to get out of control. First, a V-Spec 2 Near sold for 9 million yen. Then an M-Spec Near sold for 11 million yen. Now, with the fluctuating yen to US dollar exchange rates, that was still only about $100,000 at the time, so nothing too outlandish, especially considering it was just 2 examples. But by 2016, it wasn't just 2 cars. Near specs were readily selling for over 8 million yen. And in the summer of 2016, one particular V-Spec 2 Near kept bidding and bidding and bidding up until it reached the mind-boggling price of 16 million yen. That's 160,000 US dollars. At this point, the Skyline market was off to the races, with every model of R34 GTR seeing a 30 to 50% price bump over the course of a year, with the limited edition Skylines leading the way. And considering how many special Skylines there were in such limited numbers, one might wonder if Nissan's intention from the beginning was to create hype through the GTR's rarity. By 2017, another V-Spec 2 Near broke the record again with a sale of 22 million yen, or about 200,000 US dollars. And the average R34 GTR price was up to 6 to 7 million yen, nearly double what it was in 2010. 2018 saw most limited edition Skylines selling around 10 million yen, with the exception of one, a white V-Spec 2 Near with 10 miles. Yes, 10 miles, sold at auction for 35.2 million yen. That was about 317,000 US dollars. And while many people said it was a freak incident, a one-off auction, it certainly did a lot to add gasoline to the fire. And by the end of 2019, most near-spec GTRs were fetching close to 20 million yen. At this point, the speculation for the price increase was twofold. One, the 90s Japanese sports car market was trending up as a whole. As you may have seen in my Toyota Supra price analysis video, the late 2010s produced a massive wave on which the collectability of 90s Japanese nostalgia grew at an exponential rate. The second thing though was unique to the Skyline. Because of its illegality in the United States, American collectors who sought after Skylines really had no way of owning them. But with the 25-year mark looming close by, many importers began purchasing and storing Japanese market GTRs in preparation for the 2024 lifting of import restrictions. And because of that, the price of the average GTR crept up month by month as more and more cars that were hidden away in Japan began to get listed for sale and bought up and stored by importers and collectors. By the time 2020 rolled around, the average GTR fetched somewhere around $70,000 US. And if you thought that was too expensive, well, 2020 was the GTR's best year yet, with the average GTR price going up almost another 50%. Now it would cost you over 11 million yen to get a GTR. That's over $100,000. In 2015, that was M-Spec near money. But if you wanted one of those now, well, that was gonna cost you a lot more. In September of 2020, an M-Spec Near with just over 23,000 miles sold for 30 million yen. That's $275,000. And then in October, another M-Spec Near, this time with 6,800 miles, sold for 33.2 million yen, which was over $300,000 US, nearly tying that insane 10-mile V-Spec 2 Near from 2018. And then just 2 months later, in December 2020, a 627-mile M-Spec Near broke every single standing record for the R34 Skyline when it sold for 37 million yen. That's over $359,000 US. So, in just 10 years, the price of an M-Spec Near went from 5 million yen to 37 million yen, representing a nearly 740% increase in just a decade. And you know what the craziest part is? It isn't even the rarest R34. The Z-Tune GTRs, the 18 hand-built examples that were the swan song for the Skyline GTR name, are still out there, waiting for the day that they can break any and all records that came before them. So now, in 2021, just 3 years away from the lifting of the 25-year restriction, there is no doubt that the Skyline GTR will continue to show its dominance as the king of collectible 90s JDM cars. And as prices climb, the dream of being able to own Godzilla as a normal car enthusiast like myself fades further and further into the distance. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys want to grab one of our broken Supra shirts, you can find it right below the like button in the description. Don't forget to hit like if you like the video and subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you guys next time.